Consider a $5 bill. It's a small, almost insignificant amount, but if you spend it every single day on a coffee, that $5 is no longer just a cup of coffee. It becomes a missing piece of your future retirement fund. The paradox of the insignificant amount is that while the purchase feels irrelevant today, the actual financial weight of that habit is staggering. In this episode, we're going to reveal the hidden mathematical price tag of your small habits. We'll explore how interest, which is basically money's way of charging rent to exist in someone else's hands, works against you when you spend. When you borrow, the borrower typically pays a percentage of the principal, which is the borrowed amount. But when you spend small amounts daily, you're paying a hidden cost, the foregone interest on that money. We're going to look at the process of how a small daily expense actually erodes your long-term wealth. Your morning commute begins with a familiar rhythm. The smell of roasted beans, the line of people waiting in their sleep-deprived state, and that quick, almost unconscious digital swipe of your card. It feels like a minor transaction, but the financial machine is already moving. When you pay for that coffee, you aren't just exchanging money for a beverage, you're triggering a complex sequence of events. Your bank isn't a static safe for your money. Instead, banks operate as middlemen or matchmakers for financial transactions. They move the funds from your account to the merchant's account in a fraction of a second. It feels like nothing, but the machine is already moving. Later, we'll see how this same mechanical process, when applied to credit cards, becomes a trap that works against you. Most people see a $5 coffee as a simple transaction. You pay $5, you get a drink. But here's the strange part. The real cost of that coffee is not the $5 you spent. It's the foregone interest. You aren't just losing the cash, you're losing the potential for that money to grow. To understand this, we have to look at the difference between two types of growth. Simple interest is a flat fee, earned only on the principal. It's calculated by multiplying the principal by the interest rate and the number of periods the loan is active. It's linear, it's predictable. But compound interest, that's where things get interesting. It's interest that earns interest. It's not a flat fee, it's an exponentially growing snowball. It calculates growth based on the principal plus the accumulated interest. If you take that $5 a day and instead of spending it, you invest it at a 7% annual compound interest rate, your money begins to duplicate itself over time. Over 30 years, this is where compound growth allows wealthy people to achieve wealth. The difference between simply saving that money in a box, roughly $73,000, and investing it is the difference between $100,000 and over $500,000. That is the actual price tag of your morning habit. This is where the math gets cruel. The same mechanical engine that builds wealth for the investor is the exact same machine that traps the consumer. If you're the one earning the interest, the engine works for you. But if you're the one paying it, the engine consumes you. Consider a small, seemingly insignificant debt. A $12 burrito, bought on a credit card with 20% interest, can quickly spiral if payments are missed. Because the interest compounds, that single meal transforms into a $50 regret. The math doesn't care about your appetite or your intentions. It only cares about the rate of growth. When you're on the wrong side of the compound interest curve, a tiny mistake becomes a permanent financial anchor. Why do we keep swiping, despite the math? Well, the answer lies in how we perceive trust and the tools we use to measure it. Enter the credit score, a 3-digit number representing trust, not wealth. It's not a balance of your bank account, but a grade on how well you play the financial game. These scores range from 300 to 850. If you fall below 580, the system views you as a walking red flag. Conversely, a score over 750 is sparkling with adult credibility. Most people, however, find themselves between 640 and 790. But how is this number actually calculated? The machine looks at 5 specific pillars: payment history, credit utilization, credit age, credit mix, and new credit. Here's the paradox. Having zero debt can still result in a trash score if there's no credit history. You're essentially a ghost in the system. The bank doesn't care if you're debt-free. They care if you've been a reliable borrower. This disconnect between what we think is financial health and what the system actually measures creates a psychological gap that encourages more spending to maintain a lifestyle that the three-digit number deems. Now, we have to address the invisible thief, inflation. It's the slow erosion of money's value over time. If you leave a $5 bill in a drawer for a decade, it stays a $5 bill, but it buys fewer things. This happens because of three main drivers: too much money in the system, too many supply chain hiccups, or simply the expectations that prices will rise. Central banks usually see a 2% annual inflation rate as normal and predictable. But when that number spikes, governments fight inflation by raising interest rates, which leads to a reduction in the amount of spending to cool the economy. If they push those rates too high, they risk triggering a recession, which is defined as the economy decreasing for at least 2 quarters or 6 months. These downturns aren't random. They are often caused by high interest rates, high global crises, or a pandemic. Your money isn't just fighting the cost of your coffee, it's fighting a systemic leak. Step back for a moment and look at the medium we're talking about. Currency is a social construct built on shared belief and trust. When you hold a dollar bill, you aren't holding a physical asset with intrinsic value. You're holding a piece of paper that we all just agree has value. There is no inherent legitimacy between a dollar bill and a Bitcoin or a stick, other than societal agreement. If that agreement breaks, the paper becomes just paper. This is why value is based on human perception and rarity. We decide that gold is valued more than a rock because we've collectively agreed on its scarcity and appeal. The entire financial system we've been discussing, the interest rates, the compound growth, the $500,000 loss, it all functions because we trust the system to maintain that shared belief. We're all just agreeing that this paper has value, and that's the only reason the machine keeps turning. Stopping the leak isn't about deprivation, but about rearranging the flow of your money. To move from a passive observer to a manager of your own system, you need to understand where the money actually goes once it leaves your hand. Most of us treat our bank accounts as safe boxes, but the reality is fractional reserve banking. In this system, banks only keep a fraction of deposits on hand, relying on the assumption that not everyone will withdraw 100% of their account simultaneously. This is a fragile balance. During the 2008 financial crisis, people lined up to withdraw their entire accounts, causing the system to crumble. Banks make money by lending deposited money at a higher interest rate than they pay to the depositor. In the US, most banks are insured up to $250,000 per person by the government to keep you from panicking. In other words, the only way to truly combat inflation is through investing. You can't just save. You must move your money into investment vehicles like stocks, bonds, funds, and real estate. This is the cheat code. Automating these movements so the emotional struggle of saving is removed entirely. Counting the cost of your daily habits doesn't just involve your own savings account. It involves the systems that surround you. This is where we encounter taxes, which we can describe as the cost of civilization. The government uses these funds to build roads, fund schools, and maintain public safety. But when you look at your paycheck, you'll see the different layers of this cost. There is income tax, which hits the money you make, sales tax, which hits the money you spend, and capital gains tax, which hits the money investments make. There is also Social Security tax, which is essentially the government forcing individuals to save for retirement. It's a mandatory system where money is forced into savings now to be paid back over time during retirement. Alongside this, Medicare is a health insurance tax used to support older people or those with serious health issues. It's a mathematical trade-off. Countries with higher tax rates generally have a higher overall quality of life. The question remains, how do you optimize your life for today while the state handles the long-term security of the rest? Looking back at the trajectory of a single $5 bill, we see that the real cost of a habit is never just the price on the menu. It's the lost potential of that money to grow. We've seen how compound interest acts as an unpaid employee, working 24 hours a day to either build a mountain of wealth or dig a hole of debt. The difference between $100,000 in a box and over $500,000 in an investment account is a decision made in a coffee shop line. The financial machine is always moving, whether you are the one turning the handle or the one being processed by it. The most valuable asset you possess is not the money you start with, but the time you give that money to grow. The clock is the only thing you cannot buy back.